Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we're talking about a topic that's not getting enough attention, and that's China's role in enabling Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. While the world watches the devastation in Ukraine unfold, China is quietly playing a pivotal role behind the scenes, keeping Putin's war machine running. Now, some might have thought China was neutral in this conflict. I mean, they've claimed it, haven't they? Beijing's all like, we respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. But action, as always, speak louder than words. And boy, are those actions shady. So without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report.
China has allegedly lied about not providing Russia with military equipment, while in Lithuania, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell warned that the China-Russia partnership was tightening.
Our team is carrying a message, frankly, a message of concern to Europe about the increasing partnership between China and Russia. China's support for Russia's defense industrial base, for its efforts behind the scenes to support Russia in its battlefield aims in Ukraine, which have been devastating and concerning.
The Russian-Chinese military cooperation goes both ways. Moscow, for instance, allegedly supplies Beijing with technologies in missiles, aircraft design, and submarine development, among other things. This kind of cooperation has serious implications not only for the security of Europe, but also for the stability of the Indo-Pacific region, where China pursues hegemony via ever-stronger military presence. Moscow's cooperation with Beijing has been flourishing for years. This became especially clear in Russian leader Vladimir Putin's remarks yesterday during the first day of the BRICS summit hosted by Russia in St. Petersburg.
Honourable Mr. Wang Yi, I'm glad to see you again. A year ago, we had a meeting here in St. Petersburg. We had consultations through the Security Council and the Foreign Ministry. The relations of comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction between Russia and China have been mutually beneficial and equal for many, many years.
But the umbilical cord joining Moscow with Beijing is as strong in economic as it is in military terms. Russia is now increasingly relying on China as a key buyer of its raw materials. China is taking advantage of the situation. In 2023, Russia became China's largest oil supplier, overtaking even the powerhouse of the sector, Saudi Arabia.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. So, let's start with the basics. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began and Western sanctions hit Moscow hard, Russia has increasingly relied on China to keep its military-industrial complex chugging along. China, being the royal frenemy it is, stepped in to help, albeit quietly. They didn't send tanks or missiles, at least not directly. Instead, they provided the crucial stuff that flies under the radar: dual-use goods. Now, if you're wondering what dual-use means, it's basically civilian stuff that can conveniently also be used for military purposes. We're talking trucks, drones, microelectronics, even good old gunpowder. China's export of this stuff has tripled since the war began, and Beijing's also supplying satellite imagery and navigation tech, which helps when, invading a neighboring country. But China doesn't want you to know all that. They deny these allegations, calling them speculative and hyped up. I mean, sure, when the facts don't look good, just deny everything, right? However, independent analysts like Robin Brooks from the Brookings Institution have tracked these exports and confirmed that, yes, China is absolutely keeping Russia afloat. Brooks put it bluntly, saying Putin wouldn't be able to keep fighting in Ukraine if it weren't for Beijing. Ouch. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Russia's military-industrial complex would be in shambles without China's steady flow of goods. During former Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleva's visit to Beijing in July, China reassured him that it supports Ukraine's sovereignty and isn't supplying Russia with military equipment. But come on, who are they fooling? Much like Russia, China says one thing and does another. They even boycotted Ukraine's peace summit in Switzerland. You'd think if they truly supported peace, they'd be there, right? Well, instead, China's playing both sides. They're fueling the war while publicly declaring their commitment to peace. It's like someone setting your house on fire and then handing you a bucket of water saying, "Don't worry, I'm here to help." Finally, why is China doing this? It's not because they love Russia, no, it's about something bigger. China and Russia share a common goal: building a new world order where the West, especially the United States, isn't the top dog anymore. And let's be clear, China doesn't want Russia to win outright either. That would be too destabilizing. What China wants is for this war to drag on just enough to keep the United States and Europe off balance. But don't get me wrong, the West isn't off the hook either. It's a fear that if Russia is defeated, the fallout could lead to chaos in a nuclear-armed state. The result? A long, grinding war where both sides are stuck in a stalemate and the only real winner is China. And yet, here we are, halfway through a third year of a brutal, full-scale war that could end tomorrow if China decides to make one phone call. It was the Finnish president Alexander Stubb who put it best. One phone call from President Xi Jinping would resolve this crisis. But why would Xi make that call when this situation benefited him so much? One thing's for sure, it's clear that China is far from neutral. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Michał Bogusz, Senior Fellow at the Center for Eastern Studies. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Yeah, welcome, and thank you for having me.
So we're trying to explore the relation of Russia and China today in regards to the war in Ukraine. And people have been saying that China's support to Russia have been pivotal for Russia being able to sustain this war. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yes, it's without China's support, Russia could not continue its war effort. Without China providing the materials and machines, special machinery tools for the Russian military industry, this military industry could not be able to keep up with the orders from the military to provide enough equipment.
And is there anything that the Western allies can do to deter that from happening?
Well, punish more China to increase the secondary punishment for the Chinese companies which are providing Russia with the machinery or material needed by Russia to continue the war. Keeping pressure on the financial institution, Chinese financial institution, which will provide the financing and providing all the network, which will giving the Russians opportunity to pay Chinese suppliers, and also trying to press more on the Western companies, which are using the Chinese proxies to sell the equipment to Russia.
Right. How realistic can this be done? We're looking at, early on when we sanctioned Russia, there's already a little bit of economic impact, but we do have to keep in mind that Russia mostly only exports energy, and that's already a big enough problem. Now we're talking about China, where a lot of our industry is entrenched in the whole supply chain of China. Is there any way realistically that these Western partners can somehow sanction China without being too much of an impact to its own economy?
Well, the pain will be there from both sides. This is how the sanctions works. But you have to remember one thing here: the pain which we have to or we should take on us now, it's nothing in comparison to the pain which one will be extended on us if we will not stop the authoritarian regimes in their approaching to change the world order we know. To the extent in which one the West will be pushed out from this place around the world, the complete change of the global order will be the biggest losers, and this will be the bigger pain. So the price which one we have to, we should pay now, it's nothing in the comparison to the price we will pay if the authoritarian regimes will succeed.
Do you think that the Western leaders will have the political will to pursue that, though? We do know that a lot of times the popularity of a politician is strongly tied to the economy. And when we try to deter the use of Chinese goods, naturally we can see stuff becoming more expensive and perhaps a deteriorating of popularity in the politician's side. Do you think there's going to be a little bit of conflict of interest there, making it very hard to carry out these type of strategies like you mentioned?
Well, I'm pessimist. I'm afraid there is no political will to do it. we are living in the democratic societies for good for us, but the downside of this is that the political power to make the big change like that need to very strong impulses. So I'm afraid we'll have to wait for the situation when Western societies will be endangered directly by China-Russian axis, and it's not the moment yet. And then there will be the political power to do it, but then it will be too late, and we'll have to pay much higher price than we could pay now. But well, this is the life.
Well, a very bleak view there. When you mentioned China-Russia axis directly threaten the West, if that were to happen, what will it look like? How is China and Russia already cooperating together now to bring the fight to Ukraine?
Oh, it's already going on. Remember that the strategic goal of Russia is not to get the Ukraine. Ukraine, of course, is the tactical, but the real strategic goal of Russia is subject the West Europe, to dominate West Europe, to create the permanent trade, military trade over the West Europe. And for China, winning in this is the Russia will be told to paralyze the West Europe. So when they came up to the situation when there's direct conflict between US and China, Russia, as the wingman of China, will keep Europe in the check, will stop Europe from the cooperating with the US against China. Remember that for now, at least for now, we have three big sources of centers, industrial power centers in the world. One is the East Asia, second one is Europe, and North America is the third one. In the case of the conflict between China and US, the East Asia powerhouse, industrial powerhouse, the Chinese part will be work for the China. Probably South Korea, Japan will be knocked out by the Chinese attack. So then we'll have the base in the North Americas, and the Europe could be decisive element in this situation. So for Chinese to be able to use the Russians to block the Europe from providing the industrial assistance to US will be maybe the key element of this conflict.
Right, so there does seem to have a little bit of mutual interest there. Switching gears a little bit, looking at things from Xi Jinping's perspective, how does China view Russia 2.5 years into the war? Like you mentioned earlier, Russia can serve as a wingman for China, but when it comes to the war, what's the perspective of China?
Well, China is, for now at least, in the very comfortable situation. They have the two red lines. Bottom one is like survival of the friendly, anti-Western, undemocratic, authoritarian regime in Russia, and upper red line, it's use the nuclear weapon by the Russia, because this could accelerate the conflict with the West, which one China is not ready as today. So and they want to decide when they will enter to the conflict with the West. They don't want allow the Russians to pull them in this conflict now. So this is the two red lines, and everything between. I think Beijing feel comfortable. Russia is dependency on China is only deepening, and China have the access to quite cheap sources of the energy and other mineral resources disposed by the Russia. So for them, for now, situation is very comfortable.
All right, so from what I hear from your description, dependency is a very strong word here. When it comes to China's incentives, it wants Russia to be dependent on China as well as the West. Is there any point where, if this war between Russia and Ukraine escalates, that it would step on China's interest in keeping this mutual balance?
Well, only in the situation where we go, if Russia go nuclear or try to attack the West, like the NATO, the eastern flank, but I don't see this gonna to happen in the predictable future, because Russia is too weak. More likely, so from this perspective, Beijing feels quite comfortable and is able to provide the assistance to Russia to keep going for very, very long.
And when it comes to the lip service that Chinese pay to the Ukrainians, repeatedly emphasizing that it respects its national sovereignty while still very clearly supporting Russia, why do you think that they're not kind of making their intentions clear, even though it does look as clear as day for Westerners looking in?
Yeah, but remember, this lip service is not addressed to us. It's not addressed to Ukrainians. It's addressed to the global South. When the issues of the sovereignty and territorial integrity are very important for the states of the global South, and China is pretending would like to create itself as the leader of the global South. So for this reason, China cannot drop this mask of the country which one is defending of the values like the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the states. But it's only the mask.
All right, that's a very interesting perspective, in which sometimes from, a European perspective, we don't observe. So can you help us elaborate a little bit about why would China try to maintain this mask in the global South? And do you think it's effective?
I think it's effective to some extent, and they need to, because the support of the global South, especially the African bloc, this is 50-something states, usually voting in the international organizations with China and supporting China. Thanks to this support, China was able in the last 2 decades to increase its influence and sometimes direct controls on many international organizations in the UN system and outside the UN system. And for this reason, they need this bloc, and this reason they will do everything to keep the support of this bloc as long as is possible.
Right, so it really does seem like its tendrils are just seeping everywhere. Meanwhile, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you for your invitation.
Cheers. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. The case of Crimea and Crimean Tatars has gotten a lot of attention. This is thanks to the Crimea platform, whose 4th edition took place this week in Kyiv, gathering over 60 participants.
President of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda, Prime Minister of Croatia, Andrej Plenković, and Prime Minister of Latvia, Evika Silina, were among the top-ranking officials at the event in Kyiv. During the summit, President Zelensky stressed how the Crimea platform has successfully regained and bolstered global attention to Russia's occupation of Ukrainian Crimea. Nausėda said Lithuania would never recognize the occupation of Ukrainian territories and that it would persist in demanding Russian troops' withdrawal. Croatia's Prime Minister Plenković assured Ukraine of his country's assistance in the energy sector, demining, treatment of military personnel, and recreation of Ukrainian children. For her part, Latvian Prime Minister Silina announced Latvia's 3rd military aid package since the beginning of the year, which will include armored vehicles and drones. The venerated leader of the Crimean Tatars, Mustafa Dzhemiliev, stressed the need to revise the ban on using Western-supplied weapons to strike targets deep inside Russia and highlighted the key role of Crimea's liberation in ending the war.
Moscow is posturing itself as the custodian of the global South, but its action in targeting a ship carrying grain to Africa does not seem to align with that posture.
A Russian missile reportedly hit an Egypt-bound Ukrainian cargo ship carrying wheat. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky denounced the strike, calling it an attack on a civilian vessel.
Ukraine is one of the key global food security guarantors. Domestic stability and normal life in dozens of countries around the world are dependent on the normal and unhindered operation of our food export corridor.
Earlier, a source in the shipping industry said that a ship carrying grain had been hit in Romanian waters near the mouth of the Danube River on Thursday night.
The Latvian Seimas voted in favor of banning cars from Belarus. Owners of vehicles with Belarusian license plates have until the end of October to take the car out of the country or register it in Latvia.
Owners of vehicles with Belarusian license plates have to take their car out of Latvia or register it until the end of October. According to the law, from November on, only a single trip by car originating from Belarus will be allowed. Vehicles not registered in Latvia or taken out of the country in a timely manner will be seized by Latvian services. The law also provides exceptions for diplomats traveling through Latvia and for humanitarian transport, as well as for people with limited mobility who are visiting relatives. Latvia is estimated to be home to some 60,000 Belarusians, who constitute the second largest national minority after Russians.
Large and easily accessible mineral deposits in Russia are nearly depleted. Geologists are forced to move further and further into the Arctic and difficult-to-reach regions of the Far East and Siberia.
Russia's Natural Resources Ministry said on Wednesday that geologists had to move further into the Arctic's difficult-to-reach regions of the Far East and Siberia in search of new mineral deposits. Only 35% of the Far East and 45% of Siberian territories have been explored so far. Russia is after critical minerals like uranium, chromium, manganese, titanium, fluorspar, tungsten, and aluminium. The minerals at current Soviet-era mining sites are projected to last only another 5 to 15 years. Russian authorities warned that the current low levels of mineral exploration could lead to a significant production decline across the industry. Environmentalists share their concerns over the environmental impact of the prospective mineral exploration in fragile regions of Russia's Arctic.
And that's all for this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.